Hey crafters, welcome to another sewing project. This one's taking inspiration from cottagecore and vintage style. Hey, the cottagecore trend, it's pretty fun. Those flowy dresses, peasant, farm, prairie, hippie inspired style, meadows and gorgeous pictures and things. If you've checked out one of my earlier videos on cottagecore, I tried out a kind of a historical research project. I was wondering if I could find cottagecore trends in other decades. When have some of these aesthetics been popular before? And could I apply some of those trends from like vintage fashion to some of my cottagecore sewing today? Well, I did. I did a 1940s inspired cottagecore dress, and that ended up being a really fun project. I will link that down below. But I took a vintage 1940s pattern and changed it up a little bit to get a sort of 1940s meets cottagecore style dress that I ended up really loving. And that got me thinking, what other decades can I find some cottagecore inspiration from? And today we're going to be diving in to the 1970s. Picture some of those maxi dresses, flowing fabric, bright prints. You might even think of like gunny sack dresses. Oh my gosh, they're so gorgeous. My mom had some just beautiful dresses. Those always inspired me, and I thought, you know what? I think the 70s could have some cottagecore vibes. I am starting off with a vintage pattern that I think is from the late 70s, maybe early 80s. Having a hard time dating this one. I'll show you the pattern in a minute and maybe you can kind of help me guess when it's from, but this pattern was gifted from the amazing Mrs. Smalley. Thanks, Mrs. Smalley! She sent me a whole box of vintage patterns and they were really fun to look through and just really inspiring. So I'm finally diving in on one that I think will be the perfect base for a flowing maxi dress. Pretty simple style, but I'm gonna use some really cute fabric and maybe even use some cute embellishments, maybe do some like puff sleeves and stuff, and get that kind of flowy, kind of hippie inspired, but also cottagey look. That's my plan. So let me show you the pattern, let me show you the fabric I'm gonna be looking at here, and let's get started. Okay, let's take a closer look at our pattern. This is pretty cool. I was really excited to receive this one. It looks super easy. I recognize that sew option there from Butterick. I've done a few of those modern ones. They're supposed to be pretty basic, so yay. Still trying to guess exactly when this pattern is from. I mean, it's a little oversized. It's got this elastic gathering at the shoulder, but it also has the drawstring belt. I don't know. Maybe you guys can help me. Is it 70s or 80s with this pattern? I'm not quite sure. But I do have some vision for this regardless. I'm thinking I want to... Oops, sorry, it's kind of shiny there. I think I'm probably going to do more of a scoop neck instead of the V. And then a maxi length. I'm trying to see what length it is on her. I can't totally see. It looks kind of midi length, but I'm going to try to do like a 70s kind of maxi length peasant dress style. And then instead of having the elastic at natural waist, I think I'm going to raise it up a little bit. Maybe not quite empire, but just a little bit more to look a little bit more like some of those hippie dresses I'm envisioning. Let's swap out that for... Yeah, I've been diving in on the pattern a little bit. So here's our finished dress. Got your elastic for bringing the shape. And yeah, I think if we, raise that waist a little bit, make it longer, it'll look a little more hippie. I don't know, I love the sleeves. Might end up making them a little bit shorter, maybe like 3/4 length or maybe even like elbow length, we'll see. But then look. Look, it's only like a front piece, a back piece, 2 sleeves, and then they're using a facing for the neckline. I might just use bias tape. That's kind of cool. I am going to need more fabric than they say, though, because I want to add some length to these guys. So Hopefully that'll help. Let's take a peek. Pattern. Hang on. Whoa. Ah, there we go. I mean, I'm kind of looking at the construction. It looks pretty simple, I think. I mean, you're getting the front and the back together. Oh, look, the pockets are actually part of the pattern piece. Isn't that crazy? I think one interesting element will be using the seam allowance on the shoulder to make casing for elastic. I may end up having to make this a little bit bigger to work with because that looks really skinny for putting elastic in there, but gotta do that. And then, well, once you get the dress together, sorry, I'm skipping ahead a little bit here, but then you're getting the sleeves on, and then you gotta add the elastic waist and shoulders. Yeah. There we go. Hey, well, yeah, let me get my fabric all ready to go here and get some pattern pieces cut out, add some length, you know, before I do that, and let's dive in. Hey, well, here is our fabric. It's this purple and white gingham. Oh my gosh, it is gingham-tastic. Got a whole bunch of it. Oh my goodness gracious. Think it's going to be great for this kind of hippie 1970s prairie dress kind of boho thing we got going on here. I think it's going to be great. The pattern was actually already cut out to my size, which is awesome. And I'm using my very high-tech pattern weights to just hold the pattern in place. I'm trying not to put a lot of pinholes in it because it is the vintage pattern. And you can tell down here I'm using my ruler and my chalk to help me kind of guess the extra length I need. I held the pattern piece just up to my body and realized I think I need about 8 inches extra to make it more of a maxi length. So I'm using my ruler, using my blue chalk, just marking off that extra. Of course, my fabric is folded in half, which is why you're only seeing half of the back of the dress, which that'll be what I'm cutting out next. Then I got to cut out the front of the dress and a couple sleeves, and then we can do some pinning and talk about sewing this thing. Well, guys, I'm taking a closer peek at this direction about using the seam allowance on the shoulder, and they're telling you to stitch 1/4 inch from the raw edge of the seam allowance to make the little tubes or the little channels for the elastic. And that's going to be pretty skinny, but more concern to me is the raw edges. I would like to tuck those under instead of just stitching them down. So I'm going to allow a little bit of extra seam allowance. I think I'm going to just use my ruler and just cut out a little extra, maybe like 1/2 inch of extra just above the shoulders, just to give me some more to work with and allow me to roll the raw edges under before I stitch the casings for the elastic. I think that'll work a little better on my fabric because I'm pretty afraid of it fraying. It likes to fray. So just a side note on that. And then I got to try to get the elastic in there. Whew, that'll be exciting. Well, now I'm cutting out the front of the bodice, but I'm kind of playing around with neckline ideas. I'm trying to avoid this really deep V in the front. I think I just want to make it kind of a higher neck and just kind of a scoop neck, which is just going to be a little easier for me to deal with it. I'm hoping to put just bias tape around that neckline instead. But I'm kind of trying to look at the picture and I'm like, how is this going to work? Because this neck opening looks really, really narrow, except I have to remember the shoulder is going to get elastic in it. So the shoulder is going to get scrunched in this way, I think, which makes the neckline a little bit bigger. It definitely needs to be big enough for me to get my head in. So,
I'm not entirely sure how this is going to work, but you know, I've kind of been playing around with my chalk. Of course, I'm going to extend the shoulder seam allowance up by about 1/2 inch, just like you did on the other piece. And then I think maybe I could raise the neckline to right about there, or just right about there. It is quite a bit higher than the original. Hopefully it'll give me enough space to try it on, and then I can adjust further. I may cut it a little higher, and then I can always cut it lower, or cut the neck hole bigger. I might even have to like take the shoulders in a little bit. I don't know. Not sure. I think I'll probably cut it just like right about here for right now, and then I can cut it bigger if I need to. We'll find out. Well, guys, I'm playing around with this neckline a little bit. You can see with the right piece, that's the front of the garment, and the piece on the left is the back. I realized that the neck hole that I had was just way too small to get a head through. I'm trying to avoid that super deep V-neck in the front. I kind of want it more of a scoop neck, but I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to probably have to just keep playing around with this. I want to get it at least somewhat enlarged before I sew the shoulder seams together. So I'm just playing around with it. This might just be the story of my life with this process, trying to figure out how to get this neckline big enough. But there's where I'm at. I think next we've got to pin the shoulder seams together. Okay, well, after adjusting the neckline and tweaking that a few times, I think we've got the shoulders pinned and ready to sew. I did make some marks so using one of my disappearing ink pens. I marked about 1 inch from the edge just to remind me, hey, you allowed yourself extra seam allowance here. You've got to sew in further than you normally would. The normal seam allowance was about 5/8 of an inch, but I gave myself 1/2 an inch extra after that. So I want to make sure I don't sew the seam up here. It needs to be down here. And we're going to use all this extra seam allowance to make the casing for the elastic. Theoretically. So let's sew the shoulder seams, and then I'll show you that elastic casing attempt that I'm about to do. Well, we have shoulders. Let's take a look at what's going on here. Okay, so we have stitched the shoulder seams, and then you can tell I've been at it with the iron here. And we're going to use the seam allowance to make 2 little tubes for elastic. Now I've ironed under the edges. Remember, I left myself a little extra there so I could do that. And then I'm going to be sewing like a little tiny line, maybe 1/4 inch from the edge of each tube. So a little line of stitching here, well, little line of stitching here, and then I should get like a tube and a tube, and then I'm supposed to put 2 pieces of elastic into the tubes, and then they'll kind of scrunch up that shoulder a little bit. I'm gonna have to stitch down like the end of the elastic here, and it'll go through the end, and I'll stitch it down the end there. I'm probably just gonna stitch that by hand or tack that down to keep it safe. And then when we finish the neckline and put in the sleeves and stuff, it'll help keep the elastic in those tubes. But I'm going to first sew the tubes, and then I'll show you that, and we'll get the elastic in there. I think I'll probably use a little safety pin to insert that elastic. Yeah, well, let's first sew the tubes, and then we'll get out our 1/4 inch elastic and get elasticizing. Well, we got that shoulder detailing done. I did end up sewing the elastic edges down by machine instead of by hand. Sorry, just wanted to let you know. I also used a little less elastic because I had widened the neckline and made those shoulders a little narrower, so less elastic was needed to gather it. But you can tell, oh my gosh, I got my sleeves. So good. Then up at the top there, that's the front of the dress. Down here is the back of the dress. And we got to get some sleeves sewn on there. Let's take a look at the pattern. So I just noticed something really cool about this pattern, and I totally love this idea. When you're sewing the sleeves in, the side seams of the garment aren't sewn up yet. You sew the sleeve into this like flat opened garment, like the front of the dress would be laying that way and the back would be laying that way, and there's the shoulder seam. Then you just sew this flat sleeve into the hole, and you don't sew up the side seam of the sleeve or the garment until you do it all at once. Isn't that awesome? Then you're not like fighting to try to get the sleeve to fit into the hole or anything, because it's not a hole yet. It's just a flat garment opened up, splayed out flat. You insert the sleeves into the gaps and then sew it together. I love that. Pattern makers, you people are brilliant. Yeah, let's do that. Okay guys, you might have noticed that that took about 3 times longer than I thought it was going to. And it's partially because I was having a hard time getting the curve of the sleeve to fit neatly into basically the curve of the shoulder. The directions tell me to stitching, easing sleeve slightly to fit between notches. Blah, 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 blah. So let's take a look. I was winding up with some extra sleeve fabric, and oh dear. So I had to really, there's more sleeve curve than there is shoulder curve. So I was really trying to like pull this extra fabric from the sleeve kind of as the outside and really work that around, because that uses up more of that sleeve fabric, and then I'm pinning it, and it matched up perfect on this side. But like even with trying to like ease it and like, you know, use up as much of that sleeve fabric as I can as it's kind of going around this curve, I still ended up with quite a bit of extra over here. Hopefully these sleeves are so poofy that cutting off some extra there will be okay, but that's why it took so long. I also like unpinned it and pinned it again a couple times, and then I got out the pattern again to try to find the center point of the sleeve because I had neglected to mark that before. So that helped because I could then line up the center point of the sleeve with the shoulder seam. And then I did have some notches on the sides, and then I just did my best to try to ease it around and in between those as much as I could, but I think that's as good as I can do. I think. Now I gotta pin the other one. Well, you guys, I sewed those sleeves on and folded the dress, kind of a dress, in half, and now it looks a lot more like a dress. Oh my word. So the side seams and the sleeves are all open. You know, it's not closed yet. When you put it on, it looks like a poncho, basically. But let's see. Take a look at those directions again. All right, so yeah, I'm going to be sewing the sleeves closed and the sides of the garment and around the pockets in one fell swoop. That's cool. Okay, so there's going to be a whole lot of pinning going on first, and then a whole bunch of sewing, but then it's going to be a dress, and that's exciting. Oh my gosh, you guys, it is now officially a dress with side seams now, so yes, it's quite exciting actually. We're getting close. There are a couple pretty big steps we still have to do. We got to finish the neckline. Now, the directions have you making a facing for that. I think I'm going to just use single fold bias tape just because, I don't know, I like bias tape. And then let's look at these directions here. To finish the sleeves, they have you make a little tube of fabric and put some elastic in it. Easy peasy. It'll take a little time, but definitely. I want to try this on though first to make sure I like the sleeve length. And then, okay, yeah. So we're going to use some bias tape to make also a little tube on the inside of the dress where we want the elastic to go. And I'm going to stitch that into the inside of the dress, put some elastic into that, and it'll make the dress all scrunchy on the outside. I could add a bow on the front on the outside if I want, but I don't think so. I think I'm going to try to put that elastic waistband more, I don't know, kind of like, not a raised waist, not quite empire, but I want this to look a little more 70s, so it's definitely not going to be at natural waistline. I'm going to make it a little bit raised, but we'll see. It is a beautiful day outside, though, so I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go for a walk, and then I'll get as much done on this tonight as I can, and I'll show you what it looks like in the morning. Good morning, everybody. Whoa, dress is looking really different. Pretty exciting. First off, you can tell I haven't hemmed it yet, but I have trimmed up the bottom a little bit. It was a little bit long, so I do need to hem it. I've also cut down the sleeves quite a bit, so those are two really big trimming differences. Now let's take a look at some of the modifications going on here to the top of the dress. Now to start with, I tried this on and the dress really resembled an angel costume from a nativity play. The shoulders were really big, the sleeves were really long, everything was just super poofy. So I ended up having to take things in a bit. And one of the things I had to take in was I had to open up the tubes for the elastic and pull out the elastic a little bit and trim it down so that there was less of it, because the shoulders were about, gosh, almost 2 inches too long. And that tells me I had used too much elastic to start with. So I had to shrink those down a little bit to get them to be more of shoulder width. That took a while, but once I got it, I could sew on my single fold seam binding here to go around the neck. If you haven't done single fold bias tape, check out a tutorial on that, because I don't know, I love it. I think it's a pretty easy way to finish stuff. It's my jam. I don't know. Also, I've got my little tubes here for elastic. I have a little gap in the stitching on the other side, and I'm going to put some elastic in there, kind of scrunch them up, get a short sleeve. I did like the long sleeve, but they were just so poofy with the poofiness of the dress. I had to kind of reduce poof a bit, so went with the shorter sleeve. And then we've got our lovely elastic at the kind of, it's like, it's a raised waistline. It's almost like under bust, but not quite. So here's my bias tape. Again, single fold. I just did little stitches on each edge and then inserted elastic into the tube that was formed in the middle. Let's see, where did that, sorry, I'm trying to see where my, oh, there it is. That's kind of where it starts and finishes over there. I kind of have two edges rolled under. It's really hard to see, but yeah, that's the little hole I used to put in the elastic. And yeah, oh my word, so she's looking like a dress. I do have one thing I think I'm going to add after I put the elastic into the sleeves and hem the dress. Hang on. Oh, wait, word. Okay, there we go. I went through my embellishment stash and I found some little vintage appliques, and I think my rickrack might be vintage too, judging on the color. But oh my gosh, I think this would be so cute, maybe at the neckline, and maybe put some rickrack around the sleeves. I don't know, I want to play with it because I think this could just really take it from kind of a modern-ish dress into something that looks actually retro, actually kind of vintage. We'll see. I mean, this dress has definitely taken longer than I thought it would, but hey, can't pass up some embellishment, right? All right, I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done.